matter of the capital constraint that smaller developers have, where big institutional players will have a minimum amount that they'll invest. They won't invest into any project that's less than 10 million, 50 million, which is something that I just never even thought of, but it makes sense because of the scale. I'm curious about where Wynwood's going to go in the sense of the actual tenant turnover. I feel like it's not as sticky as some of these other neighborhoods, right? A lot of the current retail is like high-end restaurants or clubs, and there's no real places to go and get groceries, for example. I mean, even just going to Midtown the other day and going to the Trader Joe's, like, it makes more sense to be next to there as a real person rather than.
And so that was always my problem with Brickell from a resident's perspective, and why I never moved to Brickell was that they have Publix, of course, but a lot of the retail just wasn't the type of retail that I cared to serve a client of on an ongoing basis. And I think that people's lifestyles, especially like your generation, is a healthier lifestyle for the most part, where you guys want to go to the grocery store and you want to have. Wynwood has a lot of gyms and things like that you can get to as well.
Expensive yoga studios.
Yeah,
Pilates.
Right? But those are also, rather than spending $20 on a drink, you're spending those extra dollars on the higher end yoga experiences where you can still socialize.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a different demographic and a different demand generator that's available for the neighborhoods. And if we just look at a couple of different markets, right, is if Delray in particular, we've got Atlantic Ave and we've got the beach being the two main things that we think you want to be next to, right? If you're on the beach, you're farther away from the main stretch of Atlantic Ave. And when you think about the real mentality of and the real lifestyle that people have, how many people are waking up and like walking to the beach every single day? Probably not that many.
Especially our clientele or the people we're going to ultimately sell the units to.
I just think in general that there's a subset of people that if you live next to the beach, you're going to go to the beach every day. But I think that's a much smaller percentage of people who have the ability to just get up and go to the beach and be there for any period of time, as opposed to people that are going to go to a restaurant for lunch, or they're going to go to the coffee shop on the corner every day.
Even walk to the park. There's the park right there too.
Yeah.
And that's what's another, to your point earlier, the large mixed use that's being built on Atlantic, the Atlantic Crossing Phase 2, incorporating the park. It's like the value of our land is increasing every day for every dollar that goes into those huge mixed use projects, because people want to be right there, or going to want to be right there.
Right. So even our residents or our buyers, right, are going to benefit from those projects that get completed. Like you said, the value is just going up of the land itself because of the proximity to those things and the additional value creation that other people are putting into the area. And that's the same thing that's happening in Wynwood, is some developer is going to figure out how to get a grocery store into Wynwood, and then that's going to be a major hub. Yeah. And so it could even take a kind of a demographic shift or move the market in the direction of the grocer that ends up going into Wynwood, because Wynwood has its main drag on Second Ave. And if a grocer goes in farther to the west, how much is that going to change the whole neighborhood and the way that all the other developers and all the residents are wanting to go into it? In the same way that, like you said, Midtown got Trader Joe's on the south side. For the longest time, all the center of gravity of Midtown was the Target. And then Trader Joe's pulled a lot of that activity farther to the south. And I think the design district, for example, right, you've got Midtown right there that kind of keeps things farther to the south. But now there's a stretch of development that's starting to take place going into Little Haiti and pulling its way north. And so
it's the spillover effect in many of these neighborhoods, the way that Miami's changing so much, where But you have to be careful too, especially in our target market where we're trying to be right next to that hot area of activity. And in some cases, we've seen a few deals that come our way, like in and around Wynwood and Wynwood Norte, where they're trying to underwrite like some of these big mixed-use properties that have all these amenities with no amenities or no garage. And it's like you have to mark that underwritten rent to what you're actually going to be able to offer at the end of the day.
I think that's part of the same type of thing I was talking about with the beach versus the coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
Is like what subset of the market is going to be attracted to that, and what value can you put into your property by stripping those things out, or how much value are you taking away when you strip those things out? And so going back to the Whole Foods example, I'm not going to underwrite an apartment building the same. I'm not going to use the Whole Foods anchored residential building as my comp to underwrite if I'm not putting in a similar type of amenity for the residents, even if it's a paid amenity that, it's just not something that you can underwrite to. Would you say it was $5.50 right now?
Yeah, $5.50, I believe.
So $5.50 per square foot, because there's a Whole Foods on the bottom. And I guarantee there are developers out there pitching projects that are very far from a Whole Foods, and they're saying, "Oh, we're in the same neighborhood," and they're trying to convince investors and banks and whoever else that they're going to achieve the same level of success.
Yeah, it's so interesting how it all plays out. And I'm even thinking right now of the idea just being so baked into Miami at this point. We see where the money's getting poured into, right? Most of the money in Wynwood is getting poured into mixed-use rental product. Makes a lot of sense. Same with Midtown. There is, I think, a few condo projects that are about to kick off over there too. But then you have the Grove and you have the Gables, where it's more high-end luxury products, some of our target markets. But Miami Beach, and you would know way more because you've been here for so long, but I feel like hasn't had as much investment. Mostly investment, and I'm thinking more South Beach rather than the whole strip, to like try and be specific. But there has been some investment in luxury condos right south of Fifth. But for some time, there's a lot of people that I talk to that mention that Ocean Drive and South Beach just isn't what it was. But then now I'm hearing the chatter that there's going to be a comeback within the next 10, 15 years. And I know that seems like a long time, but it's really not. That's just like the business we play in.
The beach is a unique situation because they have the historic buildings there. Yeah. And so that's one big aspect. With really any market that you go into, we looked at some properties in West Palm that had historic aspects to it, or like historic neighborhoods that you have to deal with. And so South Beach kind of suffers from that. But it's also the whole reason that South Beach is what it is, is that historic aspect.
Yeah. And to add to what you're explaining, how South Beach has been there for so long too, which is why I should say historic. But I love that only couple stories, retail on the bottom, like it's walkable. I ride my bike over there. It's a good place to be. But again, not as much money has been invested as of recently.
And you just literally cannot invest as much money into a place that's historic because you can't tear down those structures. And like you said, you wouldn't want to, in large part because that's the draw, right? It is that walk that happened organically in the past where people were developing mixed use because it made sense at a smaller scale because the population wasn't as dense. And so the thing that attracts people is now the thing that is, if you're in a developer's position, you want to build a massive high rise, you're not going to be able to do that. And then this also plays into the institutional versus non-institutional money aspects, right? These massive projects that everybody sees in the news, reads about, when you're driving by, you say, oh my God, that's such a massive, beautiful project. Those have to be funded by institutional dollars. And the institutional dollars will only go to those things because of their capital constraints and their need to put money in at scale.
Yeah, they need to place big checks. And that was something that I never even thought of, a matter of the capital constraint that smaller developers have, where big institutional players will have a minimum amount that they'll invest. They won't invest into any project that's less than 10 million, 50 million, which is something that I just never even thought of, but it makes sense because of the scale. It makes sense to do one deal rather than a lot of small ones.
Yeah, one of the debt brokers that we work with, I talked to him yesterday, and he said he, at this point, doesn't know if he could even work on one of our deals because we're only looking for 17 million, and he just got a new mandate from his company saying that his minimum's 20. Mm-hmm. And so we've been working with him, and now I don't know if we're going to be able to continue to work with him because we don't have, for one of our projects, a large enough loan size. So there's a lot of other people that we can deal with, but this changes the dynamics of things just when the companies that you're working with have minimum thresholds. And because most people, they only think about how much money is available, what's the maximum, but there's an administrative cost to putting out dollars at smaller sizes and being efficient with the way that you evaluate opportunities and are able to figure out how to underwrite it in a risk mitigated way. So still on the South Beach side of things, the south of Fifth and some of those luxury areas didn't have as much of the historic, they didn't have as many of the historic buildings to deal with, but there's also infrastructure issues in South Beach in general that, okay, are we going to build another bridge? So how are you going to get people to and from the beach? How much wastewater runoff are you going to have when you put in place newer, bigger buildings, right? Or just really any of the infrastructure constraints when you're dealing with that small of a landmass and the amount of demand that there is for it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a place that I feel like many people would love to live, but doesn't make any sense because they're not working out there. I think you've mentioned this, like to live on the beach, you want to be working on the beach.
Yeah, for me personally, that's the only way that I would do it. And there's a lot of people I've talked to that said the same thing. And the other aspect of it is that's what's created a lot of the demand for greater Miami, is that you had South Beach there, and it wasn't only South Beach though. There was a whole community that got developed in the greater Miami area. And you see a lot of that same type of thing happening right now up in Palm Beach, right?
Yeah.
And so in Palm Beach, now you've got West Palm that's really become like a major boom, that there's massive amounts of institutional money flowing in there because how much more can you do in Miami? How much more can you do in Fort Lauderdale? How much can you do in Palm Beach? Like nothing.
Yeah.
And so where's the money going to go? It's going to go as close to that demand driver, and that at this point it's like a center of political power too, right? That the money is gravitating towards it, and there's a spillover effect that happens as close as you can get to it.
Yeah.
So that's for us why there's additional reason for us to be looking at places like West Palm or even Delray,
which gets that spillover too.
Yeah, you get the spillover
money, political, and even people that go out, like younger kids. I talk to younger people that go out in Delray because that's the place to go, because the avenue, there's real coffee shops, real restaurants, real bars that's walkable that you could jump from one to the other.